Hi, it's Paul Green with another one of our Focus On panels where I bring together a panel of people I consider to be experts in their field to discuss a relevant topic that hopefully listeners, watchers, viewers, whoever, you small business out there will find useful. As we're live streaming on different social media platforms, if you're hearing this, then you can put any comments, questions in on that platform and we will access it and bring it up on the screen if it's relevant to the conversation we're having. So, without further ado, let's just go around the room and see who we've got today. So, Christina, who are you and what do you do?
So yeah, Christina Robinson from Green Umbrella Marketing. I just hang out on social media all day, not for myself, for my clients, making sure that they're creating the presence that they need, whether they lack the time, the enthusiasm, or the courage to do it themselves, and generate leads and do all that good stuff.
And what fun it is too, I'm sure. Kevin.
Yeah, hello, Kevin Robinson from your.
Not putting you out, am I? Just don't disturb your day.
I was thinking about something else then. Mostly, I was thinking, will I be able to get through the first sentence without Paul interrupting me? Clearly not.
Damn.
Yeah, Kevin Robinson from Your Copywriter. I spend most of my day writing copy, as you can imagine, like it says on the tin. But specifically, where we tend to focus is writing blog copy, web copy, etc., that pushes people's sales funnel. So with a kind of a messaging sales edge to what we do.
Fantastic. And Jessica.
I'm Jessica Shales from the Ideal Marketing Company, and we offer all sorts of marketing services, but really specialize in helping you understand your audience and why they should work with you and what kind of messaging you need to get across so that they're attracted to you and engaged with what you want to do.
Okay, excellent. So brand is the theme for today's session, and with a myriad of platforms and lots of content that could be put out there, really it's just a question to get your insights of how do businesses maintain that brand awareness, that brand presence when there's so many different marketing outlets to be in. What are some of your top tips? What's some of your advice, and also what are some of the mistakes that you think that small businesses are making out there because they're not representing their brand in an effective way? So we'll go in reverse order. So I'll come to you, Jess, if I may.
Sure. Well, I'm probably going to say what Christina and Kevin might have said, but start with the good brand guidelines is going to be absolutely crucial, which should include tone of voice, the way that you want to be represented, and make sure that anyone who's going to be communicating on any level on your behalf knows what those guidelines are. I think that particularly when you're working with outside support, or even when you have several people within an organization, good brand guidelines that includes messaging is absolutely crucial.
Okay. So tone of voice is a nice segue to you, Kevin, I guess, because you're working with a number of clients representing them in terms of the content you create. So how do you go about making sure that you maintain the tone of voice with all these different clients that you're working with that have their own tone of voice? So how do you go about that other than being a bit schizophrenic?
It's a little bit of being different people all day, yeah. I think of it like it's like a kind of a puppet show in here. It's just a next puppet along that writes the next article every time. I mean, Jess is entirely right. It does come down. Tone of voice is part of that brand guideline. It's part of how they are and of how they speak and who they are. And there's a lot of tricks that people use. I think of people. Companies as celebrities and how do they talk and pick a particular personality for them. Other people work different ways, but what it comes down to is consistency. And by the time you've produced something a few times for a particular client, you almost don't think about it anymore. You switch into their brand, you switch into their guidelines, and if they don't have the stuff that Jesse's talking about, then you create that and stick with it themselves. But it's all about consistency. I think it's about consistency right across the brands, and it doesn't matter which section of that brand you're talking about, visually, written, whatever. Consistency is key.
Okay, thank you very much. And Christina, who hangs out a lot on social media, what are your thoughts on it, and what mistakes do you see some of your clients making when they're trying to maintain this brand image?
Okay, so I'm going to pick up on mistakes because otherwise I'll be repeating what Jess and Kevin have said already. The biggest mistake I see, especially with sort of very, very new businesses, is we've got to get out there. We've got to start selling our goods, selling our services, and we start executing marketing strategies, executing sales strategies as well, before we've really got a brand in place. So we end up doing like all this stuff, not necessarily in the right places and very inconsistently. And we're creating all this noise, but because we haven't got a brand, there's no stickiness. People are thinking, oh yeah, it's that girl or that guy, but they're not really remembering. Like there's nothing there to make you memorable, okay, to create that stickiness. So like people will, like more often than not, when you see me, I'm wearing green. My business is called Green Umbrella. It's like I get comments, or I get people send me photos of, like women send me photos of green dresses that they've seen, that they've thought, oh, you're like this, and it's that like just the consistency within, like even my nails are green. That consistency with the colour, it's a trigger. So when they think of me, they think of green. It's easy for them to recall Green Umbrella Marketing. So it's things like that. And if we've been doing all this activity before we've really got a brand in place, then 6 months down the line, 12 months down the line, we're starting to backpedal and sort of try and sort of fill in the holes that we've missed along the way. A big part of your brand is, people talk about, Simon Sinek and start with why. What is your why? What is your purpose? Or if we put corporate terms on it, what's your mission? What's your values? Like they're important elements of your brand, because from that, then we understand what our tone of voice should be. What's going to be in alignment, what's not going to be in alignment, and that kind of stuff. So like the biggest mistake I'd see is people go in hell for leather without actually considering their brand. They think that, right, I've been to Fiverr and I've got someone to do a logo for me. I've got a brand now.
Yeah.
That's not it. That's not it.
Can I add something to that? So I don't know if you find this as well, but one of the things that I see as a mistake quite often is that even once they've established and once they know who they are, they've got the tone of voice, everything's great, they'll do a little bubble project and ignore it all entirely. So they'll simply go, well, our normal marketplace is hotels. We're going to do one specially for bed and breakfast. So we'll forget the old branding and just like we've got nothing at all and just do something randomly different. And I don't know why that happens. And that happens with really experienced, established companies. So I don't know if you see that, but I see that quite a lot.
And it's easy to do. And to your point, really, if you don't have that established, then it's very easy to go on Canva and see a template that looks great, but has got nothing to do with your colours or your anything else, and to have almost every single post be completely different. Like it looks lovely, but for a different company entirely. So that's kind of a mistake that's, I think, easier to make if you haven't established what your colours and everything else are, but also your messaging. I think what you were saying about values and your why and stuff, it can be a really helpful exercise to involve anyone else in your organization in what those values are, so you can bring them along with you. When people are setting up brand standards or whatever, or whatever their document ends up being, it can be kind of a team building exercise to make sure that everyone's bought into what they are, because then it's easiest to communicate values that the whole team actually have been involved in and engaged with. So it doesn't just need to be putting a stamp on the outward facing communication. It can be something that you bring the whole team along with.
And this is the thing though, people think that's something you do when you've got a team. Well, no, I talk to a lot of sort of solo operators. Okay, it's just one person in the business. I'm like, give me 3 words. Okay, if you're walking through a crowded room and as you pass a group of people and they're talking about you and your business, what are the 3 words they're going to use to describe you? Okay, and people will, they'll say, approachable, trust, success, like, and they'll come out with these words. It's like they're like your top 3 values. And so, like, even if it's just one person in your business, it's still important that we know this, because like I said, that's where we produce alignment in the brand, because it seems like social media, where are we going to hang out? It's got to be in alignment with our brand, or the content we're creating has got to be in alignment, even if you feel like the platform's not quite right. Who are you going to partner with? You know, who are you going to guest blog for? Who are you going to, support their posts, and they're going to support yours? It's all got to be in alignment with your brand.
And that's early, though, isn't it? I mean, you made a point there about that being a thing that you need to do at the beginning and very early in it. And I think it does. I think it needs to be right at the start, because, Jess, when you said about if you've got a team getting them on board, if you do that right at the beginning, it's so much easier to maintain that later. There's an old saying about it's easier to cross a river at its source than when it's become a raging torrent. And if you don't have that fixed early, all you're doing is you're creating more and more of these little bubbles of the wrong activity, aren't you? And it's hard to pull them out. Once they're in the marketing mix, it's easy to get rid of them at the start,
But the thing is, it develops.
Yeah, of course it does. Doesn't mean you can't change it. Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, I think I'd be a bit nervous asking people to sort of describe me in 3 words. Might do that just for laughs.
I can think of 3. They're the same one 3 times.
I don't want the words now, Kevin.
You have to change the rating on the video after.
It probably would, yeah. So, Christina, you touched on it earlier in terms of strategy, and Chris is putting stuff in the chat. Thanks, Chris. Very non-useful. So, you touched on it earlier and talked about strategy. Do you find that a lot of people, as you said, sort of dive in, but even if they have a brand, they still are not clear what they're doing with that brand across the different platforms?
Definitely. It's I think it's about defining brand within your like defining what your brand is within your business, what's allowed and what isn't, which comes back to your brand guidelines. But yeah, absolutely. It's like we want brand awareness, but we never put anything out there that is on brand.
I think there's probably an argument there in the same what Paul's saying about strategy. If you don't have that strategy, you actually don't have brand anyway. What you've got is ideas. It's not until it's all enclosed, isn't it?
I don't think that I would say you don't have, like, you haven't got brand, but I think it's you think about, people come to me, right, I'm going to put together a Facebook ad strategy. So these are the objectives, and this is the copy I'm going to use, and these are the images I'm going to use, and actually none of your colours are there, the tone is off, we haven't really used your logo other than where the Facebook ads has picked your logo as your avatar. So it's like you can have that brand and still end up doing something completely different, just not thinking how to bring it through. And this is the thing, you got to love your brand. Like, I love the Green Umbrella brand. When I look at the previous versions of it, I think, God, I loved it then, but like now I just think it's a bit meh. Whereas how it is right now, I absolutely love and adore, and I'm like completely immersed in it. And I think this is the thing, if you've got that connection with your brand, and let's face it, if you haven't, who else is going to? Then if you can get that, if you can fall in love with your brand at that level, it's always going to come through in your strategy as well.
It's also addressing that brand isn't just about logo. I think a lot of people think it's just logo, and we have been referring to colours and obviously we have said tone of voice, but it's so much more complex than that, isn't it? And how it interrelates with your actions and everything else. So you can have a brand guideline, going back to that could be 2 pages or could be 200 pages.
It's interesting how often people don't think that way, though, Jess, because I often see brand guidelines for the video side of the business that don't include video. There's no thought being given to video at all, and you think how often that is. And of course, we're all brand as we're sitting here, aren't we? Christina's wearing green, I'm wearing the black that I always wear. It's we're all brand, we're all part of that. It's just so big, isn't it? Okay,
so that's an interesting thing, because you've said the black that you always wear. So that's your personal brand. Black isn't in like the 13 Media brand.
No.
Like your copywriter, you got that it's like it's sometimes this is we've got to make this distinguishment as well between like what's the business brand, there's 3 brands at play: your business brand, your personal brand, potentially your product brand. And to be fair, if I was talking to a room full of people within the recruitment industry, I'd be talking about a 4th brand, which is your employer brand as well.
Yeah,
it is, but they're interlinked, aren't they? They're all interweaved these days. And if you go look at a company, you go look at the people within that company as well. Their personal brand comes into play, doesn't it? So you can't ignore. It's perilous to ignore how big brand is now compared to what we used to talk about just a handful of years ago, when it was logo, tone of voice, brand guidelines, away you go, all done. It's bigger now. It's bigger.
Bring up a few comments. So Steve has built on what we've said. Your brand isn't just your logo; it's more about your why, position, values, and offering. Steve's commented that we're not really promoting our brand colours. It looks a bit quite grey. I guess that's the platform I'm using.
I'm not sure how grey I am.
Yeah.
That's
I'm
right.
not sure about
my brand colour is orange, so I can't help but turn up with my brand colour.
Yeah,
in my defence, my branding is normally stronger than this, but Bella has stolen my green screen for photography, so that's why I've got the blonde one.
Shocking state of there. No, I think it's thanks for your comments, guys. Thanks for tuning in. Feel free to ask more questions or raise more comments. I mean, this platform, it does allow me, my little icons there. The blue of the names is my blue, so it gives you some flexibility. But obviously, if it's talking about the whole thing, it is pretty grey. But I guess that's to make it generic for any users. So when I rebranded, I must confess I didn't realise the complexity of creating a brand. So historically, I would have just gone and got a logo and thought, let's start there. I had no concept really of what journey you should take in order to really establish that. A bit of what Steve touched on. So when I started off, as Kevin knows, the vast majority of the time was spent with Kevin trying to work out my story, my positioning, and things like that before we even got anybody involved in coming along to look at the colours, the fonts, the brand guidelines, the logo, etc., etc. So that was quite an interesting journey for me. So I guess there's a number of businesses out there, if they're like me, that don't even have that concept. And I guess do you find that, Jess, with people that come across you? Because I know you're very, very strategic in terms of looking at people's marketing plan. And I guess brand's very important, and message is very important for you to hook onto in the services you provide.
Yeah, and we are talking about brand message today. I think obviously we need to be careful with semantic, and I think that possibly where some of the conversation here is coming in is with going off and talking about logo by accident, but we're supposed to be talking about brand message. Really, the most important thing for us is to make sure that the message meets what the audience cares about, and that is just frequently not really in place. People will talk about it's the features versus benefits. People talk about what they do, and not to sound like Simon Sinek too much, but not actually why someone would care about that, or why the audience would do so. Part of creating a really good brand message is to get that across, is to be really clear. And I might have said Sinek. Is it Cynic or Sinek or one of those? I think everyone knows who I'm referring to.
I say Simon Sinek, but I assume that's the way it's said. I don't know.
So to your point about kind of the getting that message right, it really does. You've got to start with who your audience are, and what they care about, and then everything else becomes an awful lot easier.
I think care is a really important word to use there, isn't it? It's about it's about making people. Making is the wrong way to describe it, but it's about showing people the things that our clients care about, in that they care about as well. It's about a bridge, isn't it? It's about creating that kind of caring bridge, if you like, an inclusive bridge almost.
Yeah. So back to your schizophrenia, Kevin. You've got a number of sub brands or different brands within your organisation. So how do you manage that and make sure that what did you bring them together and have them be consistently messaged, or do you have a different approach for each?
It's a different approach for each, and at the minute, your copywriter is the lead, but they have values, they have an approach which is now on the other side of my flip whiteboard thing, so I can't read it direct from you, but we have keywords, like Jess was saying earlier, and Christina was saying, key things that are important to each brand. Your copywriter we have, for instance, okay, so is a rule that any image for your copywriter cannot include a pen and a pad, because that's such a cliche for writing.
Mm-hmm.
And the only time it's allowed to be in is if it's being used ironically.
Mm-hmm.
Everything else, we can use typewriters from the 50s because that's retro and cool, but everything else has to be clean chrome gleaming keyboard. That's not what your copywriter does. Not use pads and pens. It's a modern company. It's funny, and it has laughs, and it jokes. The repeat ads we've been running in the Business Community magazine are a joke ad every week, and so it has personality. That's its personality, and I think of that personality. Whereas 13 Media is a more traditional kind of marketing personality. It's more a more traditional serious personality than your copywriter has. So I think of them as people.
Mm-hmm.
I guess, just find it easier that way. But my training is as a screenwriter, not as a necessarily as a copywriter first. So that just might be instinct to create characters, which is what screenwriters do.
Yeah, I'm not sure whether schizophrenia is an appropriate word nowadays.
No, it's
Is it multi-personality disorder or something like that? I've got no idea. So sorry if I'm being not politically correct out there. My apologies. So where were we? Back in the room. So Christina, so if people are messing it up, how do you get back on track and sort of still maintain your credibility, if you like?
So the first step is an audit, 100%. Like, go back to basics. Create, like, if you haven't got it already, just create a one-pager. Jess said, like, your brand guidelines could be like 2 pages or 22 pages. Just put a one-pager together. This is what we're supposed to look like. This is what we're supposed to feel like. This is what we're supposed to be communicating, like what our overall message is. These are the pains we're solving. And then go through everything you're doing. And on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being like you're hitting all those marks, how close are you? And if you're scoring a 6 out of 10 on LinkedIn, what do you need to change to get to that 10 out of 10?
Mm-hmm.
And it can be we can make it as simple as that. Like I say, if you're one person in a business, it's got to be simple, because otherwise it's so overwhelming. If you are then working with, let's say you're outsourcing your social media to someone like me, make sure you've got a folder together that's got, these guidelines in it, that's got this in there. I say it has got all the assets and everything in there as well, but it's got that one pager that says, this is the problem we're solving. This is why we're solving it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Jess, in terms of people you're working with, is there what are your feelings about? Let's try and speak English. So, do you think that people try and get their brand out too widely and are not really focused on maybe where they should be having that brand message? What are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. I think if you do that, by trying to appeal to everybody, you can end up appealing to nobody, and you can seem very similar to all your competitors. You're not going to stand out. So positioning can be, or understanding your positioning in a market can contribute to what your messaging is, and everything else about your brand, including the visual elements of it, and the identity. Because often in a marketplace, you can be positioned based on, it could be on price, it could be on something that is really unique about you, but that helps define everything. What we also find is that very few companies are only speaking to one group of customers, yet they try and speak to all of them, and as a result, either don't appeal to any of them, or isolate some, or whatever else. So what can be very helpful, particularly on social media channels, is to identify, okay, of all the different people that we could be speaking to, let's speak to these on Twitter and these on LinkedIn and these on Facebook, because that's where they are. that's going to make much more sense because we understand enough about each channel to know what the audience is, and to use them differently. So once you understand more about the different people you serve, you can tailor your messaging to them. And an example would be estate agents often have multiple, they've got quite a complex set of customers because they're dealing with vendors who are selling or renting out a property, and then the people who are or offering a property to rent, and then they've also got the people who might rent or buy, and that obviously not all estate agents sell and rent, but so who do you have to continuously attract properties and fill them, and there's this constant balancing act. So trying not to speak to all of those people in the same place in the same way is really critical to spinning the plates and getting things actually to work.
Yeah, totally. And estate agents are a great example of that. I mean, I write for a number of people who are in housing marketplaces, and you write one article that is 5 tips to get your house ready for a viewing, and then you're doing another one that is 5 ways to look for a house to buy, and it is, isn't it, about targeting. There's a lot of Steves in the chat. One of the Steves just mentioned this about, can we have people not call Steve in the chat? It's confusing. I've lost it now, but they were talking about specifically that subject of who are we vending to, who are we talking to, everything. And if you get that wrong, it's just not going to work, is it? But it does mean sometimes multiple content and multiple messages for the same client.
Yeah, we'll bring in one of the Steves. Yeah, only comment if you're called Steve. So, which comes first, brand or offer service? Who wants that one?
Not me. I don't want to.
Chicken and egg, really, I think.
Yeah, I was going to say the same, Jess. But I think the thing is, like, realistically, Steve decides that he's going to start a business doing this thing, and like something's happened to trigger that decision. Quite often, you're then developing that idea, aren't you? Developing what that product, what that service is going to be, how it's going to help people, who it's going to help, why you're doing it. That it's kind of simultaneous. It's about Jess has just been through this. You perfect that bit. So I think those two things actually happen simultaneously. When you're at the point where you're we're actually doing this now, and you go to someone to get the visuals together, when you're kind of giving them a brief and telling them what to create imagery around, that's the beginning of your brand right there. So I think if we go, sorry, Jess. No,
carry on. I'll come back to it after this. Go.
So yeah, like I said, I think in those early stages, it is it's a simultaneous thing. We just don't realise that it is until we're, like I say, a couple of years down the road and suddenly going, oh, what is our mission?
Yeah, we've ended up adding additional products and services as a result of probably how we deliver stuff and specialisms that we've developed over time. So to come back to the question, you might probably start with a product or service and decide how you want to deliver it and build your brand. But that doesn't mean that you can't then add more products and services and put the established brand on that. I think it's a continuously evolving, like you said, your brand continues to evolve as well, doesn't it? But we developed the audience analysis, which I think comes out of our brand, out of our way of turning up and doing stuff for people. So yeah, I agree with what you're saying, Christina.
Yeah, the other Steve, I'll call you the other Steve. Sorry, Steve, getting confused with my Steves. So he's talking about, who do we serve and how do we serve them? Your brand message should be around that. I guess we've touched on that, and that is true because it's got to, whatever you're creating and whatever your message is, it's got to be relevant to your customer base, hasn't it? I guess. No point in just sort of doing something totally nebulous that has meaning to who you're trying to engage.
Yeah, and if it doesn't, I mean, if you reach a stage where the message is being there's a great phrase, I think, from Lord of the Rings, I remember, it's been like butter that's been spread over too much bread, where it becomes thin and the message is breaking down. Then you have to make a choice whether you go, that product doesn't fit, or I have a second brand, which is the choice I made, of course, at one point, where somebody who'd known me for 9 years said, I didn't realize you wrote copy, and it was nearly 70% of the business turnover. I thought, well, that now needs its own brand. Clearly that message cannot stretch that far. So I think there is as brands develop and as messages develop, there is a little kind of point to remember, which is sometimes you can stretch them too far and they break, they become too thin.
Yeah.
So sometimes we can get caught up adding something in that isn't in alignment, and it's that you get distracted by something that's shiny, you end up doing something, you're like, that's actually not part of what you do. So for example, I get asked, if I decided to recruit someone that was going to sit in the office cleaning up people's data, like I could totally, like I know exactly who to go to pitch that. I'd be selling it by the end of the day. We'd have clients on it. It's something I get asked about all the time. And Jess, I'm sure you do as well. We're talking about email marketing and asking about the data, and they're like, oh, well, I've got this, could you sort that out for me? And I'm like, I can make a lot of money doing that, but it's not part of marketing. It's not in alignment with what we're here to do. It's like, that should never be part of our service offering. Sometimes if you're not really engaged in your brand, you can let the distractions come in, which just dilutes things.
Because there's problem, we're often we're problem solvers, aren't we? And some clients will come to us and say, I've got this problem I want you to solve. Your brand helps you to decide, is that a problem I will solve, or will I just point you in the direction of somebody else that I think would be great for this? And we'll work with people, because I think all of us marketers need to play well with other marketers and other service providers, to make what we do unique and you're positioning so much stronger then.
Yeah. And I think you make a really interesting point there, Jess, when you're talking about problem solving. I think a lot of the time, that's what we do. And I know good salespeople quite often talk about that as well, that they don't sell anything, they solve a problem, And I think good marketing quite often is solving the problem of getting the message right and then making sure it reaches the people who should get it. It kind of almost all boils down to that, doesn't it, in the end?
They talk about the whole drill and the hole in the wall, features versus benefits. Like when you sell a drill, you're not selling a piece of machinery, you're selling a hole in the wall. But actually you can push it so much further, because you're selling a hole in the wall so someone can put a shelf up because their partner has been nagging them and they haven't been fulfilling that role as, the person who can put the shelf up on the wall, or the independent person who can put their own shelves up on the wall. Or that's actually what you're selling, is something far more emotional, in a lot of cases, depending on if it's a business to consumer or business to business brand. But business to business stuff is still emotional. There's just
selling the sizzle, not the steak, isn't it?
Yeah. So it depends on how far you really want to push that. Okay, but what are we really doing, and what problem we were really solving, and actually pushing that far can be a challenge. It's more comfortable.
Yeah, I think this is the thing when you think about sort of that brand message, and this is where we sort of step into Kevin's area with like storytelling and that sort of stuff as well. Most businesses are solving, I'd say, 5 to 7 core problems. And if you can look at your business and take everything down to those sort of 5 to 7 points, and everything you're doing marketing wise falls into one of those 5 to 7 points, that's when you really get consistency in your brand.
Yeah, totally.
That's when you get consistency in everything you do. And this is where you then you decide which stories to tell, which answers are relevant. Like that is a powerful story because it's hitting 3 out of those 7 points.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes quite understandably, clients, I don't know if you find this, they seem to forget that as time goes on in some way. They become so involved with the business, with the product, they know all the technicalities inside out. And sometimes you get a client who's just, their biggest problem is that they're forgetting to message that to their customers. They're forgetting to message benefits, and they're talking about the technicalities, or they're forgetting to message the hole in the wall and talking about the speed of the drill, that nobody cares about. So I had one recently who was talking about the marvelous brushless motors on their electronic gates, and I went, "Do you mean the quiet?" So, yes, that's what it meant. Nobody cares how it works, So I think when we talk about problem solving, half the time we're just you're going back to sort of stating the obvious, restating it to people who've got a bit lost in what that message was.
Mm-hmm.
Let's bring Steve. The other Steve, I'm losing my track of Steve now. So it's a very good question, actually. Thanks for tuning in, Steve. I appreciate that. He's a live streaming expert, so I'm a bit nervous now because we're probably cocking this up as we go. So he says, how do we measure if our branding and voice is working? What metrics would you suggest? So who wants to take one for the team on that one?
Nobody wants to touch that one, do they? Everyone's going, "Oh, God,
Christina, you're very fond of metrics." Christina loves metrics. I know she does.
I do love a few stats along the way. Okay, so there's a bunch of stuff that you can measure, but it's like if you're looking at ROI, that's when it gets really tough. So we can look at things like, how often is a brand getting mentioned? We can look at, the traffic that we're getting through to our websites. We can look at, I'd argue it is hard to truly measure, but you can look at things like share of voice, that sort of stuff as well. So you can you measure your social media activities, the engagement you're having, like your audience across LinkedIn and Facebook and your email list and everything all together, like what's the contacts in your phone kind of thing, like what's that number and is it growing? So there's a bunch of stuff we can measure, but if your brand is working for you, you're going to make more money, and it's as simple as that. It's like all this other stuff. People like me will throw let's measure this, measure that, measure that. Are you getting more leads? Is the phone ringing more often? Is there more money in the bank?
Yeah. Did somebody say, "I've just read your blog on It's Great, Can I Have?"
Yeah.
And that's the ultimate metric, isn't it? That's what we're here for. That's what the business is there for, is to get the right products to the right people. And I make a big point there, not saying to sell things, because that's a very different thing. It's about, Paul knows I have this thing about responsibility marketing, that we are responsible for making sure the right people get the right product more than selling stuff, But yes, absolutely. And a lot of those metrics that people ask for, and again, a bit of a bugbear of mine, is when they're vanity metrics, aren't they? Christina, how many followers have I got on Facebook this week? Yeah, how many are active?
Yeah.
I think a lot of them, they're going to have to be the soft ones where people go, "Oh, I love that element," and that's the likelihood of that going into a spreadsheet and then ending up in a pie chart is really small. But it's going to have to be paying attention to people going, "I really like this thing," or "I noticed that thing," or even sharing stuff that because they like the way you've done something. And the problem is that all the metrics that you just mentioned, they could very easily be attributed to something else, like proving that brand and not the thing that you decided to write about, like the topic, because the fact is the topic is interesting. It's just really tough. That's why none of us wanted to answer.
No, and the difficulty is that. Sorry, I was just going to say the difficulty is that from our point of view, the best metric we can have is sometimes really soft one, isn't it? We know we're succeeding. I've just had a client take a great big order. That's fantastic. It's great for him. But the best metric I've had that I'm succeeding in somebody's voice was somebody said to me in a car park recently, I sent some emails out that you'd written for me and the client thought it was me. That is the ultimate, for a ghostwriter, that's the ultimate compliment. That's the ultimate metric. So they are very soft, those metrics, which is why nobody wanted that question.
Is it? That's
of course
not,
it is.
that's...
But that's brand that they're seeing. The customer is seeing brand.
Because
if it's a person that is the lead of that thing and they think it's their voice that's talking, then that brand is being enhanced, isn't it?
If they're saying it to other people, like I said, it's that I can sit in an echo chamber, everyone telling me I'm awesome, and my bottom line not increase.
Absolutely, of course, yeah.
So you know, Steve's put in, he's just put sales ? Steve Highland, and it kind of made me smile a little bit because of what I just said about like measuring it in the bottom line and stuff. And the thing is, we could measure brand based on sales, okay? And so you say sales ? I can go yes, because if your brand's strong enough, people will just give you the money anyway, right? They're like, they want in, like, take my money. But your brand could be really, really strong. Your marketing can be on point. But if you've got a shit sales process, you're not going to increase your sales.
Yeah, you've got to have all your ducks in a row, haven't you?
Yeah, so it's like,
attracting leads rather than
absolutely. And this is the thing: if the business isn't growing, then we need to start from the bottom and work up. So is there a problem? Is there a problem in sales? Okay, is it the leads coming in? Well, if the problem's the leads coming in, it comes back to marketing. It then comes back to brand. So we got to look at it all the way through. Sometimes, like we've made the sale, brilliant. Sales team's happy. Again, as a solo operator, you take your sales hat on, put your delivery hat on, and you're a bit shocking in the delivery. So
yeah,
things still haven't changed.
It's a good point, actually. We haven't yet looked at that on any of these focus on panels. So it might be good to look at, sales process and sales funnel and management of that, just as a topic. So I'll schedule that at a later date. So I'm going to bring this to an end. I'm sure you guys could talk all day on brand and brand image, but we're not going to do that. So are there any final points that you want to make before we close it down?
I've got one more that I think our company is going to turn 20 next year, and we're at the moment going through a brand, and I wouldn't say it's a brand, a rebranding, but it's almost, we are doubling down on exactly who we are, with the potential that we could actually isolate, or we're going to put some people off. And I think it's taken a while. Sometimes your brand, it can be difficult to go bold with it, because that there are some people you're not going to appeal to anymore, but you will appeal to those that you really are going to appeal to. So I think that's the thing where we've been going for a really long time, yet we really need to double down on communicating exactly who we are in a way that will really resonate with the right people. So, and we're a marketing company, so you can keep going back to your brand and decide how you show up in the world. It never really stops.
Thank you very much. Anything from you, Kevin?
I interesting things just gone in the chat, actually. Steve Whittle, another Steve. Where are the Steves coming from? No, it's the same two Steves. Sorry. Yeah,
Kev.
That was it.
Must be your age. You're getting confused.
It's just the one Steve. Do you think he might just be changing his identity But yeah, I mean, he said that he works in corporate and he has to say no to speakers who can't deliver a talk on brand. People are your brand. That's kind of how I was going to sum up as well and say you need to remember that, people are your brand and people are your customers, and it is about people, and it is about care, and it is about caring about things and about getting those emotions across and that emotional contact with your customer base. And whatever you do with your brand, no matter how good your product is technically, no matter how good it is, at its job, unless somebody cares enough about it at both ends of that chain, the sales will not be as good. They will just not happen the same way.
And Christina, any final thought from you?
If you don't love your brand, no one else is going to love it. Do the work, prioritize it, change it, create that one pager if you haven't got that in place. But above all else, it's like, you have to have that emotional connection with your brand. If you don't, you're just never going to be able to get anyone else to have that feeling, and that's where the real money is.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks, guys. We'll wrap it up there. For those of you listening on replay or watching live, thanks for tuning in, particularly the two Steves that engaged with us today. I think that's my target audience now, people called Steve. Also, thanks to Chris Lambert and Russell Parker that were in the studio in the background. We're here every week at Tuesday, 11 a.m. We cycle through different themes. Today was a sales and marketing theme. Next one will be more operation and resources based. I think Chris is joining us on that one, so we'll see him next time. And yeah, thanks to our panelists, without whom this would not be possible, and particularly Kevin, whose birthday it is today, who came out specially. You can now sort of leave the session and go and get your free bus pass. So
I have a client arriving in about 10 minutes.
No, when you said client, you meant carer. Okay, guys, thank you very much.